Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of DPSI with Aggie. Today, I have a great pleasure to present my very esteemed colleague, Sue Leschen, who is going to be our guest on the Meet the Trainer segment. Bonjour, je présente ma collègue traductrice, l'avocate Sue Leschen. Bienvenue, Sue, ça va?
Ah, bienvenue. C'est gentil, Aggie. Et ça va? Jak się masz?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very well. Świetnie. Thank you. Sue very kindly agreed to carve out some time out of her very busy schedule, and in a few moments you're going to find out why it is that she is so insanely busy. She's going to answer some questions to help you make better decisions when it comes to training and preparation for DPSI and DPSI Law in particular. So why don't you start, Sue, by telling us about your background and your experience in language provision and training.
Thank you. Yes, dziękuję. So I wasn't always an interpreter and to a less extent a translator. I was originally, well, I still am a lawyer, but I'm just not practicing anymore. I was working in a big litigation department for a town hall in Manchester, UK, where I'm based. And somebody just came along and said, oh, can you do some translation work of a contract? Can you go to court and go and interpret in French? Somehow they found out that my French was very fluent. And I just basically got hooked on that kind of thing. And I thought, wow, this is great. This is a real marriage of my legal and language skills. And then I discovered there was actually an interpreting and translation department in Manchester Town Hall. So to cut a long story short, I went along there one lunchtime and found out all about the CIOL, Chartered Institute of Diploma in Public Service Interpreting, but specifically the law pathway, which I thought, wow, this sounds like right up my street. Again, to cut a long story short, I did the exam at a local college in Manchester. I studied at a college at night, which was a bit heavy going. I know a lot of you out there are considering perhaps giving jobs up and stuff, but you can't quite afford to do these kind of exams. It wasn't an easy decision. Once I'd got to grips with the course and I'd eventually passed the DPSI Law, I realized what a great investment this was for a future career, actually to do something that I really wanted to do, that I really enjoyed doing. So it was one of the best, most risky, I think, changes that I've ever put into practice in my life. You'd suddenly go from earning a fairly good salary on 15th of the month to actually not earning a salary at all. You have to provide yourself. You can't sit in cafes all day. You have to go out there and work some kind of income. That was all a bit of a culture shock to me, having to do all that and not just get paid for sitting at a desk, but it was good. So that was way back many years ago, and I haven't looked back since. I initially went part-time at the town hall, set up my interpreting and translation business, which is called Avocate, which for those of you who speak French means woman lawyer, which is what I am. And eventually left the town hall, having set up my client list and databases and all that kind of thing. And I always thought, well, okay, if it doesn't work out, I could maybe always go back to law. That was my safety net, but I never have, not in the respect of being a full-time solicitor. Yeah, I've just gone from strength to strength, really. Initially started with PSI, a bit of a mixed bag, a little bit of health, which I can't say I really enjoyed that much. And I had to do it, I think, to discover that I didn't really want to do it. And then I went into law, interpreting in courts, in the tribunal service for solicitors, law centres, home office, police. And those were the glory days, what a lot of us of my interpreter generation call the good old days. This was pre-outsourcing, pre-2012, and jobs were just growing on trees. Some of us were turning jobs down. I mean, you could have worked for the Home Office 7 days a week. There was so much work. It was a really good opening into PSI work, into public service interpreting work, because it was reasonably well paid and we were never short of jobs. Obviously now in 2023, the political climate and economic climate is very different. And I do sympathise with people coming into the profession profession now, it's not so easy. So there we are. So that's where I've come from and where I am now. I do want to say that I don't just do PSI work now. I still do a lot of it, but I've also added, mainly since outsourcing actually to increase my income, business interpreting. So I do a lot of business interpreting, which I enjoy a lot less. It's very different hearing a sort of human interest story in a courtroom, somebody who's assaulted somebody else and maybe children are being taken into care, that kind of thing, from sitting around a board of directors table and they are all talking about, for example, the company logo. Should it be white and black? Should it be yellow and green? And, I'm sitting there 3 hours later and I'm trying to stay awake because, it just doesn't really grab me. But the sad truth is that I'm earning 3 to 4 times the rate that I would have earned on PSI work. So that is why I think a lot of colleagues have sort of, either gone from PSI, sadly, altogether into other fields, or like me, have chosen to diversify to some extent.
I think diversification is a good idea, and we might
Yeah.
actually ask you a bit more about that towards the end to give some ideas to colleagues.
I do think diversification is really important, Aggie, as a safety net more than anything else, because most of my generation couldn't have predicted outsourcing was going to happen. We were totally shocked when it happened. We weren't ready for it. We weren't prepared. And then it really hit us in the face. None of us knew the pandemic was going to happen, for example, and we were all going to go into remote working. We all had to get up to speed as a sudden survival attack with remote working. So diversification of knowledge and skills, really, really important.
I agree. And this is exactly what you are showcasing with your other business venture, which is tutoring and providing instruction, as it is called in the lingo of teaching, to the DPSI candidates. So please tell us, Sue, what kind of support can they count on from you within that service?
I offer a very sort of specific, targeted type of DPSI law mentoring. I can either mentor groups or I can mentor you on a one-to-one basis. I tend to get more individuals approaching me because they want the one-to-one attention, because every candidate's needs are different. For example, I've had candidates who want to really improve their written English. They're fine on all the other modules in the exam, but when it becomes an issue related to the translation into English paper, that is where they're going to fall down, because their spoken English often is very, very good, but their written English is just going to fail them. I can think of a few candidates where we've had to work really, really hard on their written English just to get it up to pass level. Other candidates on an individual basis might want specific help with the legal terminology in the exams. What I tend to do is we go over past papers, which will bring up a whole variety of legal topics. You might look one week at assault, the next week we're looking at theft, or there was a ghastly CIOL DPSI Law paper once, cyber security. There was a role play to do with somebody who'd gone away from the office and one of his colleagues got into his computer, hacked his way in. That was a terribly difficult paper, I thought, because you either knew the legal terminology to do with cybercrime or you didn't. It's a far cry, very different from, say, understanding legal terminology to do with theft or shoplifting or something like that. So that's mainly what I do. We go through past papers. So I think that is the most practical way of preparing for these exams. I've also got many modules and so on that I can share with them on, say, the legal system in England and Wales, because quite often the candidates aren't British. They've maybe come to live here. They're not familiar with the criminal justice system here. So, we might even go through that kind of thing. I have initial sessions with candidates to ascertain what it is that they actually want help with. And as I say, I do find candidates have very different needs.
That sounds brilliant. So you provide that very personalized experience
Yes,
to on
very
one-to-one. It's quite a flexible curriculum that you provide.
It's very tailored, yes. And the other thing I wanted to mention, Aggie, is that I do help them to glossaries for the exam, because those are basically lists of the relevant terminology that they're going to need for the exam. And I can remember myself when I was studying for my DPSI Law exam at night school, sitting next to a couple of colleagues, like one either side of me, and actually looking over and seeing what they'd written, in their glossaries. One was quite good. She'd got most of the terminology right, but the other one hadn't. But the trouble was, there was nobody to tell her that she was wrong. This is quite worrying. The teacher on that session had quite a few people in the class. And I think this is where having one-to-one with me, I can actually go through the glossaries with the candidates and say, do you understand the difference between, for example, burglary and robbery? Because legally they're different. And most candidates would say, oh, no, I didn't know there was a difference. So, I'm sort of helping them increase their chances of passing, but doing more than passing, because we're really targeting getting correct terminology. And of course, with these glossaries, that we're preparing together, they're not just useful for the DPSI exam, they're going to be really useful in their future careers. They can update them as the law changes and so on, put them on an Excel sheet or whatever. They're going to be useful for their lifelong careers.
That's fantastic. I do really like the bit about the glossaries, because like you said, you sometimes can come across maybe ready-made glossaries which are sold or swapped that aren't exactly right. I remember seeing something that still had plaintiff instead of claimant, and some Americanisms which obviously does not apply in the England and Wales, or actually the pan-UK context as it is going to be for the DPSI law as of this year. That's really good to know. When it comes to resources, you've mentioned the past papers and you've mentioned the modules on law. What other resources do you provide for your students?
I basically point them in the direction of other training that I would recommend to them. And you and I, Aggie, we've just been talking before about other training. There's a lot of training out there. I think it's very hard for new candidates to know which training to choose and which not to choose. I would encourage you to make sure that you get a recommendation before you sign up, and certainly before you pay for any training, get a recommendation from an established PSI colleague, because I'm finding that mentees are coming to me sometimes from other trainers. For example, they may have gone with a trainer who is training on the American legal system.
Oh, dear.
And of course, the terminology is completely different. They might be talking about automobiles instead of cars, for example. They might be talking about attorneys instead of lawyers, this kind of thing. So you've got to get your basic training stuff right in the first place. I strongly recommend that if you are intending to sit the DPSI law exam, that you get a trainer with some kind of legal training background or legal qualification background, because it's going to make all the difference. Because I have to say, sometimes some mentees transfer to me from other trainers, and I see the handouts that they've been given and stuff, and some of them are actually either wrong legally or very out of date. They might talk about, if I give you an example from family law, they might be talking still about access to children. We don't use that term anymore. We talk about contact with children. That sort of thing can really put you right out of date. And when you start working, if you're working with solicitors, which you probably will be, and barristers, if you're going to do a DPSI law exam, they'll be very aware that you're really out of date.
And the law does develop every year. It's all ever changing, and there's always new legislations being introduced. So that's very valid. Thank you for that. You have mentioned that you have initial meetings with your candidates. Now, this is something I like to ask everyone, and I know it can be a bit controversial, but from the point of view of an ex-teacher, I always think in terms of, are you at the right place with the set of skills that you have? Do you sometimes say to your mentees, okay, listen, you perhaps need to spend a bit more time on XYZ, whether it's written English or any of the mandatory skills that are needed for DPSI, so simultaneous, consecutive, sight and written? Do you ever give those candidates that kind of, let's say, tough love?
Do, and I think that's a really good point. And even to the point where I might even say to them, look, from what you're telling me, maybe they've got full-time jobs, they've got 4 children, they've got a sick parent, I'm very honest with them, Maggie, to the point that I'm saying, look, do you realise that this is actually an extremely high standard exam? This is level 6 Ofqual. Ofqual is the organisation that basically checks, this kind of level of qualifications in the UK. Level 6 is reckoned to be sort of first year university level. It's a tough exam. And I tell them this, and I say, people do fail. It's not guaranteed that you're going to pass. CIOL doesn't publish the failure rate for whatever reason, but they don't. And quite surprisingly, some of the people I've known, none of my mentees have failed, actually, which is very good news. But some of the people I hear failing, I'm really surprised, because they're already out there interpreting and so on. And I think, gosh, they've got loads of experience, and how on earth have they failed? But maybe they haven't done enough preparation. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, it is an expensive exam. By the time you've sat all the units and you paid the exam centre fee, which is online now, but you're talking around £1,000. So you want to really make sure that you do get it passed at first attempt, or okay, if you have to resit, because you are allowed to resit one or more papers, you don't have to do that too often. It's all working out very, very expensive. So yeah, I mean, I do give tough love to some prospective candidates and look, do you think this is the right time in your life maybe to do this? Some of my mentees, they have so little time because of their various commitments that they end up booking me on Saturday mornings, for example. Okay. Sometimes they even want to have sessions on Sundays, which I'm not so keen about, to be honest. Yes. We all need a day of rest sometime.
I agree.
The other thing, I am very flexible with my mentees. I don't say, right, it's going to be every Monday at 7 o'clock or something like that. What we do is we agree from week to week what is a suitable, convenient time for both of us. And a lot of my mentees really like that because, of their other responsibilities and so on. And I don't charge cancellation fees, by the way, if anybody wants to cancel. I'm very flexible because, I mean, to be honest, Aggie, sometimes it could be me that has to cancel because of a commitment. We just book from at the end of each session to the next. And a lot of my mentees really like that.
I think that's terrific. Very kind and very generous of you, because obviously time is money these days. Just to plug on that, I understand that the lessons are online, so your tutoring is online, or do you sometimes have maybe groups or individual candidates on face-to-face basis? I know it's still kind of a new thing in the post-COVID era, absolutely, but is it mostly online?
It is these days because, like you say, we're still sort of recovering, I suppose, from what we were doing during lockdown, which is almost 100% remote, weren't we? But before lockdown, yes, I mean, I would arrange to meet my mentees face to face, at a mutually convenient place, usually in Manchester, because that's where I'm based. But, that's really nice to get that face to face rapport going. But these days it's almost all, on Skype or Teams. And actually, funnily enough, I suppose some mentees just want to talk to me on the phone. So I'm quite flexible. I say, yeah, okay. And then we have a bit of email correspondence in between sometimes. The ones who want to brush up their legal English will send me prepared translations, they've worked on, and then they'll email them to me, in between and so on. So...
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's just, I mean, I don't know how it's going to go now, whether there's going to be less remote working. I'm not seeing that change personally.
I think the remote is going to be a permanent fixture. From the point of view of someone like myself who mostly works in courts and tribunals, it is just so much more convenient.
Yeah.
Instead of dragging all the parties into court for a 1 hour or 20-minute hearing, I think remote is the new black, if you will. So you've mentioned about the support and you've mentioned about the teaching and tutoring. Now, because obviously DPSI and formerly DPI are exam-based qualifications, do you offer mock exams or assessed practice, for example, when you set up an exam-like task or situation and assess and then give feedback to your mentees?
I do. And, I do that if they want it. I mean, I have to say not all mentees do want that. But if they do, yes, I'm quite happy to offer that. And, I try to give very constructive criticism so that, somebody's not going to fall apart if I'm actually saying to them, I don't think you're ready yet. Try and work together with the mentee in terms of the actual booking of the exam, because once I've explained to the mentees, I spend about 2 to 3 sessions actually initially explaining to the mentee what is involved in this exam. And I tend to go on the CIOL DPSI Law website, that particular page, and we just comb through it so that I make sure they're very aware of what it is they're now letting themselves in for. Some of them are quite confident. Oh, yeah, I can do that. I'll sign up for the exam in June. Or maybe alternatively, oh, no, I feel really a bit overawed by all this. I'm going to leave it till November. I try to be really fair, Aggie, with them, and say, if they're the ones that want to sign up, say for June, and I think they're not ready, I tell them so in the nicest possible way, that you're risking, in my opinion, losing a fair bit of money here. That usually works.
I think that's really fair, and I think that's really commendable, because I believe in being confident and I believe in believing in yourself. But at the same time, like we discussed, it's a difficult exam. It's very, very taxing.
It is.
I remember my exam, and I literally spent 9 months doing nothing else but studying, well, with the ability to interpret and translate beforehand. So I know just how much it absolutely wrung out of me. And like you said, for someone with a busy family with commitments, it is something really worth thinking about. So I'm really happy that you have got this really ethical stance when it comes to telling the candidate, you need more time, take it slow, don't rush it. So that's really good. So we've mentioned, Sue, that you are a lawyer linguist, and this is the core of your teaching, mentoring service. Now, do you specialize in tutoring in specific languages? For example, your working language French, or is it just a language neutral type of teaching?
I'm mainly offering mentoring for anybody working into English or out of English. So English is the common denominator. I do offer specific mentoring for anybody sitting DPSI Law for French. Obviously, I'd be crazy not to. So yes, I get quite a few mentees for that. What I tend to do for the other languages, i.e. not French, is point them in the mentees, that is, in the direction of trusted colleagues who can actually help them specifically with their language issues. For example, I've recently taken on a mentee whose language is Portuguese, and I've pointed him in the direction of a very well-known colleague who's got Portuguese as her first language. And what I'm doing with this particular mentee, for my part, is going through the terminology and explaining to him what it means. And what my Portuguese colleague is doing with him is running over in Portuguese the terminology once he's understood it. So we're sort of working together. Yeah, we're working together in that respect. So he's really getting a 2-for-1 price deal, if you like.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. When it comes to your experiences with the DPSI tutoring, first of all, how long have you been providing this service? And what is the thing that you like the most about tutoring colleagues, candidates for DPSI?
I would say I've been mentoring for DPSI Law now for probably something like 10 years. It started off on quite a small basis, sort of 1 or 2 mentees, and then it absolutely mushroomed. And I actually now have a waiting list.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah. So it just really took off. And the one thing that everybody's saying to me is they like the flexibility of my way of working. That's been really good. What do I like best about it? I like meeting colleagues who are just coming into the profession and just helping them to get to where they want to get to. I have to keep very up to date, obviously, with the law because I'm teaching them it. So I like that because it means that I have to do quite a lot of legal research. So I always enjoy doing that. And I enjoy helping people to learn. I think, we're all involved in lifelong learning, aren't we? However much we've, as we call it in English, been around the block, we're still learning. I mean, I'm still learning now, after being a PSI for, when did I pass my exams? It was around 2002. So, yeah, it's a good 20 years. Yeah, it's a good 20 years just keeping au fait with new developments, really. That's what I enjoy. The exchange of information. And I really enjoy it, where mentees aren't, say, British nationals, or they're not French, for example, because obviously I understand the French legal system. Maybe they're from Germany or wherever they're from. I always sort of encourage them to try and think of equivalents. So I'm learning a lot, actually, or maybe they're from Poland. I'm learning about the Polish legal system. And so it's actually quite a fair exchange. I've got a really nice mentee at the moment who's from Argentina, from Buenos Aires. And I'm learning an awful lot about the system over there that I just didn't know before. And sometimes we've got equivalents in the legal systems and sometimes we haven't. So we then have to do kind of workarounds. Well, okay, you haven't got solicitors. What have you got? We sort of try and think of the nearest equivalent between us.
I think that's quite interesting. That comes with just being able to connect with so many different colleagues from so many different backgrounds.
Yes.
I think it's wonderful about our profession in general, that we just mix in ways that you probably wouldn't mix in a, say, day job.
Not at all.
I've mentioned at the beginning of our interview that you are an extremely busy person. One of the things that you are very prominent, and if anyone has not been hiding under I was going to say hiding under a bush, but that's not the phrase. Bushel, thank you. Hiding under a rock, that's the one. So you know that Sue is very, very active in a number of different professional and otherwise organizations for linguists. Tell us, Sue, which organizations are you a member or a part of the board of directors of, and tell us about your work in that area.
Well, first, I want to really encourage all of you out there to join professional organizations. It's a real must, because this is how we network, how we learn to get jobs and so on. And you can all see Aggie's holding hers up and I'm holding mine up. We are both members of the National Register of Public Service Interpreters.
Your picture's a lot prettier, though.
I don't know.
I look like an axe murderer. I think it's just, yes, yours is a lot better than mine.
So I've been a lifelong, really career-wise member of the National Register of Public Service Interpreters. So that's something you really want to join. Once you've passed your DPSI, you can apply to register. And the National Register of Public Service Interpreters actually has a register, would you believe, that we are on, and people looking for interpreters search the register. So quite honestly, by the time you've been searched a few times and offered a few jobs, you've paid back the annual fee. So it's definitely worth being on. And also, it's so important to be on this register. The NRPSI is an independent regulator and has a lot of clout, increasingly so actually with the government and so on. So what's not to like? You want to be part of what they're doing. I used to sit on their professional conduct committee. I did 2 terms of 3 years each, so I sat on it for 6 years. And the professional conduct committee actually deals with naughty interpreters who've been reported by clients, sometimes by the police, sometimes even by other interpreters. Actually, that happens. Once the complaints come in, people like me have to look at them and evaluate them and decide what kind of action that we're going to take. I'm no longer on the professional conduct committee, but I am still a member. I attend the what are called town hall meetings. These have been organised quite recently by the CEO, the chief executive, Mike Orlov, who's a great guy, very proactive on our behalf. And I think they're about Aggie, about every 2 months or so, something like that, online. These are really good sessions where we talk about rates and things that are bothering us and difficult agencies that we might work with. They're really good, no holes barred, I think, sessions where you're with your colleagues, you feel very comfortable. You can talk about what's bothering you, really.
And gets something done.
You're not just talking in a vacuum and somebody's going, absolutely. This is somewhere where there is action, results happen. We get involved with prominent people, we have campaigns, and you want to be part of it. You don't just want to be an interpreter. You need to be out there promoting our profession, because if we don't do it, who will? So that's a really big passion of mine. I'm also a member, actually I'm a fellow, which is a senior member after years and years of experience of the Chartered Institute of Linguists. And I would urge you all to join that. This is the organisation which has also a section for exams. You can sit your DPSI through the CIOL qualification centre. Lots and lots of fantastic CPD, some of which is free. If you're a student, CIOL membership is actually free. So what's not to like? And I'm just going to give a plug for my next session, my legal terminology for language professionals session for CIOL, which is on the 14th of September. And this is a session where I'm going to be talking about interpreting for the Home Office, which is something I've done for, I have to say, I've seen a lot of changes in the way we work. Of course, we're largely working on Teams now when we're working with the Home Office, where caseworkers are interviewing asylum seekers and so on. So we used to be face-to-face up and down the country, but at the moment, anyway, we're on Teams. So there's that. Please do sign up for that. It's actually a free session, so worth joining. I'm also a fellow, so a senior member also of the Institute of Translation and Interpreting, who also has some great CPD. I attended a session yesterday, which was all about networking. We had some fantastic ideas and networking going on in the chat of that Zoom meeting. Both CIOL and ITI have registers like the NRPSI do. And again, people looking for interpreters and translators search these registers. So if you're frankly not on them, you could be struggling to get clients unless you've got some really good contacts. I'm also, because of my legal specialism and expertise, I'm a member of the Association of Police and Court Interpreters, the APCI, who have some CPD, not as much as the COL or the ITI, but they do have some. And again, it is a reputable organisation. All these organisations are really worth listing on your websites, for example, your LinkedIn profiles. If you still have business cards, not many people these days, but so some people do. But, all this kind of membership stuff is really good in terms of your marketing because it makes you look professional. There are clients, certainly direct clients, who would want somebody who's got those kind of accreditations. A fantastic organisation that's only been going for about, Aggie knows I'm going to mention now, I think, only been going today for, I think it's about 3 years. AIT, the Association of Interpreters and Translators. I know you come to a lot of the sessions, they're on Zoom mainly. Fantastic CPD offerings. I just don't think I've ever come across a professional organisation that has that much CPD on offer.
I completely agree, yes.
It's just wonderful. You can attend at least one a week, maybe 2, sometimes even 3 sessions, depending on your interests a week. I've got something coming up for them, I think, soon as well. I think in November, where I'm going to be talking about interpreting in immigration. Look out for that one.
Fantastic.
I think student membership's free for that, isn't it?
It is. We've heard from Christina McTaggart, DPSI, who is one of the directors of the AIT. There is a free option for a membership for students. It is very, very generous offering. And also they do, like you said, they have an absolute huge roster of CPD. A lot of it is free. One of the best places to check them out are actually 2 places. The NRPSI's CPD section, which contains a lot of curated events, and also a website. I will be posting links to all of this, so for those of you frantically writing that stuff down, don't worry, you can find all the links, including Sue's website and links to her events in the video description. Another great place is Skilliga, which is a cooperative portal created by Monika Kokoszycka, my wonderful colleague. And you can also browse a lot of events, and the emphasis is on free because obviously free is better than paid. So you can check out those 2. And also, as Christina mentioned last week, Eventbrite, you can follow AIT and get pinged about the next event. Make sure you keep your eyes peeled for Sue's next 2 events in September and November. You've mentioned about diversification. So you've mentioned about just the absolutely staggering amount of entries in your portfolio that you do. And one of the things that you do on a regular basis is delivering dedicated training sessions in different aspects of law for interpreters. Please tell us more about this.
This is something I sort of hadn't really intended to go into big time. And again, it sort of snowballed, I think, because there aren't a lot of trainers out there like me who some people might say, thank goodness for that, but who, have the legal background, who are actually practicing interpreters as well. So I sort of found a bit of a niche market here because there was a gap in provision. There were trainers out there, but not with my kind of background, not with my kind of experience. I thought what a lot of colleagues need here is very practical training, very down-to-earth training by somebody who's actually out there doing it. Recently I gave a presentation for the Chartered Institute of Linguists entitled "It Was Murder." And this was really based on a case quite recently that I interpreted in the Crown Court, a murder case. I was really able to talk from my own very anonymized, what I was talking about. Obviously, I couldn't reveal any names and so on. But, I really based it on the fatigue of interpreting in a murder trial for 3.5 weeks, being away from home for that amount of time. This kind of terminology I had to familiarize myself, which actually wasn't just legal. I had to familiarize myself with a lot of heavy duty medical terminology because the injuries to the poor victim were so severe in the skull and inside the eye and so on. And there were all these medical terms. I didn't even know what they meant in English, let alone, what on earth they might be in French. But actually, and what was quite interesting was a lot of medical terms, as you probably realize, are in Latin anyway.
Yes.
So I was quite happy to leave a lot in Latin. But, I had to kind of understand all these parts of the eye and the skull and so on, the interior workings of the brain, because there was a brain injury in this case. It was quite a lot of research, and also being face to face again after the lockdown. That was another issue. We sort of many of us have got out of touch really with being face to face, working on a daily basis with all these experts, police, medical, midwives, you name it. There were masses and masses of witnesses. I just really thought I could use this personal professional experience as the basis for a webinar. So I did. And then, of course, I had worked previously on other murder cases, including actually, I don't know if any of you have heard of quite a recent one. The defendant is a Lucy Letby, a nurse who has been accused of murdering, I think, 7 babies in a hospital in Chester, and attempted murder of, I think, about another 10. And I've been on that case because there was a French-speaking witness and a couple of other murder cases as well. So I kind of put all those other cases in as well into the webinar. And we had some really fantastic feedback. We had, I believe, something in excess of 350 people registered for it. Wow. That was really good,
That's amazing.
It is, and I mean, okay, it was free, so, I can't be too...
Still.
Even on the day, yourself, Aggie, when you have a webinar, you've got loads of people registered, but not everybody attends. But even on the day, we had something like 150 people actually attending.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
That's a lot, isn't it? That's a lot. And I mean, I think one of the things that shows, and when I do put these legal terminology webinars on, there is a need for it. The colleagues are just lapping it up because I explain the terminology, I explain what it's like sitting there in the dock. The judge isn't very friendly necessarily, in terms of giving you a break and stuff.
Yes.
All that really. It's just really practical stuff.
I have attended some training events by Sue, and I think the most recent one was about the no-fault divorce, and I can really recommend them. They're just really well presented. I am a very informed consumer of CPD, and being a teacher myself and having to do a bunch of presentations at university and for students, it's a skill in itself to pass on knowledge in a clear, concise, accessible way without either boring someone or saying things that are very, very obvious that you probably know already. So I honestly wholeheartedly recommend Sue's events. And I think I interrupted you, Sue, so you didn't mention the NWTN, Northwest Translators Network, that we sometimes bump into each other during those events. And you have presented during the Booster Day quite recently, which I thought was an absolute success. It was just fantastic, the whole event.
You. That's my local group, if you like, because it's Manchester based, and I'm in Manchester. And they have some really good CPD. And of course, we're all going back face to face. At the recent Booster Day, I remember I was presenting on terms and conditions and non-disclosure agreements. But yeah, it was a fantastic day, and it was hybrid as well. Which I think was really good. You know, so some of us obviously were there face to face and had the lunch together, which is really nice. You know, I really like socializing with colleagues over lunches, but yeah, it was great that quite a few people also joined remotely, including yourself,
including
Aggie,
myself.
I think.
Kudos to Kate Lowe for organizing.
Oh
It
yeah,
was absolutely fantastic. So
yes.
we have talked about a lot of things that you can avail yourself when it comes to Sue's offerings. Please do check those out. So I would like to just round off our interview, Sue, by asking you for your top 3 tips for DPSI Law candidates, for people who are looking to obtain this qualification.
Okay. Number 1, don't go in cold. You must prepare. You cannot walk off the street just because you've done a bit of interpreting and say, okay, I'll register and I'll probably pass. You'd be lucky if you do. So that's the first one. Do not go in cold. Second, prepare. Do everything possible you can to make sure that you go in really confident because you've done the homework. You've been through all the past papers. I mean, not just 1 or 2, but go back several years. You can get past papers actually from CIOL now. They used to be free, but they ain't free now. I'm sorry about that. But I mean, I've got vast supplies of them, and other trainers will have, you know, because we collect them like confetti. And number 3, don't be downhearted. Is a bit of an uphill struggle. It is expensive, but you've just got to think of the bigger picture, that this is your gateway into a fantastic career. It's worth it, as per the advert. You're worth it, I think is the saying, isn't it? You're worth it. So yeah, you know, if you want to be part of a profession, you're going to have to sit professional exams, and that's a really good one to sit.
Thank you so much for that, Sue. I am so happy that you were our guest today. Like I've mentioned, you can find all the links and information about the associations we've mentioned, the events we've mentioned, and the places where you can browse CPD. If you are thinking about sitting the DPSI examination and your language is French, or if you want to get really good teaching and really good instruction from lawyer linguist, contact Sue. She's based in Manchester. If you're based in Manchester, even better, you can have a, you know, café au lait, croissant, and you know, meet tête-à-tête rather than remote. That's also very nice. Thank you so much again, Sue, and I hope I'll probably more than likely see you very soon. Thank you again.
I'm sure you will on some Zoom meeting or other.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, and speak to you soon.
Dziękuję. Cześć.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.